So we today are going to be talking about various topics. We're going to talk about the bump out wall feature, which we kind of introduced a couple years ago that we were looking into it. We're going to talk about the supported canopies. And we're going to work on discussions about items that are in progress that you have not maybe heard about, or maybe you've heard a little bit of buzzwords about them. And we're going to talk about the MBS Forum site. So with that, we'll go ahead and go forward. So in the bump out, the introduction, we'll tell you a little bit what they are, tell you what you're going to need to do for setup. We're going to show you the data entry for entering one of these type system features. We'll talk a little bit of what we've done in the design, the detailing. We'll show you some building drawing samples that we're currently having and show you an example of a shot drawing where this has had an effect. So when we talk about a bump out wall, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at a portion of the wall that sticks out beyond the main building wall. To do this, we've kind of used the extension system and pushed it through there. So the main building is going to have flush walls, and your bump out is going to consist of outset girts. We are not doing bypass girts at this time, and there are no vertical beams that are used for these outset girts along the bump out wall. At this time, we'd like to throw a poll out just to see how many of you have done a bump out type wall building in the last year or so. We've had about 62% don't use it, and about 38% have done one in the last year. So if you're going to use this, here's what everybody kind of wants to know. What do I got to do? What's new that I have to set up? Well, we do have some new settings that you're going to have to initialize. DT build is going to have a few here. We'll kind of show you a graphic of what those are, but here's a list of all of those. When it comes to the bump out girt and the top wall girt, we have some parameters that you can control the offset of the girt for if it's a C or it's a U or it's a Z type, if it's toed up, if it's toe down, so that you can adjust the location of that girt at that transition. If you do not run an extension all the way along the building length or width, if you stop at a bay line, then we have some parameters to extend the girt. Normally you can enter an extend amount. We don't allow you to go very excessively, like maybe no more than 8 to 10 or 12 inches beyond that frame. But if you don't enter that value, we have a hard-coded parameter that you can set so it'll default to. Otherwise, you'll get, like on the third case on the right, it'll be 0, so that girt will stop right at the web of that column. Panel detailing, we have a parameter that pulls sets your deduct for the wall panel below the transition, and a deduct for the exterior bump out panel above the transition point. Same thing when it comes to liner. We have a deduct for the liner panel that is at the wall line below the transition, and a deduct for the liner panel above the transition for the bump out region. When it comes to panel detailing, what can happen with the bump out is your panels might detail nice and clean and aligned, but your bump out extends at the end if you have an adjacent bump out. So you could have this little 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, whatever it might be, your bump out area on the left and the right end, that there's panels that are going to be needed there. What we introduced was some more methods. One, which was to help you with this panel detailing. And we give you a few options there, and we'll go over those down in the next slides. And we also have methods that help you dictate the rotation of the girts when there's CUs and Zs that we saw previously. So with DM568, when it's not set or it's a 1, defaultly, the MBS is going to detail you an extra panel on each end. And then they'll just field cut that, and you'll have plenty of material there. Option 2 will allow you to start the panel detailing at the edge of the bump out and then detail what's needed on the far right end. Your ribs won't align with your wall panels, but it'll be the least amount of material that you would need. Option 3 maintains your panel alignment, but it only details you one extra panel that they may cut and put on the other side if it's needed. We do have new markers available. We've got markers to help with what to do with the downspouts. You can, if you've done canopies and you see there's a marker as canopy return, we have a similar effect here with the downspouts. You can have a little jog and bring it back into the wall line. There are markers for the bump out at the point where it's at the end if you don't stop and run all the way to the end of the building, and so forth. We'll kind of see those in illustrations later to make them a little more obvious than this. So here are some of those markers. So at the bottom side of the bump out, we have the soffit in bump out where the bump out bottom face meets the wall panel. We have the soffit bump out, and that is able to be using your extra 11 field to base it on the width there. Then we have the soffit out bump out, and that's at the very outside edge of the bottom of that bump out where it does the transition back to the wall. When your bump out stops at the end there, we have the bump out end in where it runs back and it meets the building line, and then we have the bump out end at the exterior point. Now, if the bump out were to run all the way to the building length or width, you would use a normal corner out marker. This is only for the case when the bump out is going to stop short of the building width or length. This is the case we talked about with the return with the bump outs. Due to that, we have the calculations very similar to what you've seen before with the canopy return. In the case when your bump out stops short of the building width or length, you can have these little areas that create their own little eave or gable. So we give you a marker there to make sure you get the material to cover that area. And this is the one everybody's going to love. This is the work we've done with other markers. They are current existing markers. They're not more markers you're going to have to set up. And these should all consider the bump out width and or the adjacent bump out width for when you think of things like at Girt, because that bump out extends out due to the adjacent bump out. That adds more span that marker has to consider. Here's an example just showing a building with a bump out. And so we're going to put this in MBS and run it. So this is the building entry screen for the bump out feature. It's laid out in the normal structure that you're used to seeing that we're going with, which is a record structure. And then you have sub-tabs. You have the layout where you're going to enter the information that's pertinent to the size, what bay it starts in, what bay it ends in, its extend if it's necessary. The left and the right extend, they will disable and enable if you're at the corner and there's an adjacent bump out. They will automatically set to that adjacent bump out width and disable so that you can't try to push them beyond that corner of that other bump out. Now, if you stop at an interior line, then you're allowed access to the left and right extend to adjust those as needed. You can also set the Girt information and your panels. And yes, you can put no panels. So if you want to use something else other than a panel that you supply, you can do that. And then in the trim section, you would enter your colors for the locations at and around the bump out. In the design, as we mentioned, the building walls are going to be flush. You cannot do bypass wall girts with a bump out. Your E-strut mount is going to be outset, and your bump out girts are also going to be outset. In the detailing, the transition trims between your building and the wall bump out are going to be detailed for you. Your purlins are going to be extended on the roof due to the adjacent bump out if there's one at the end wall. Your roof panel lengths are going to be also readjusted based on a bump out width. Wall panels will stop at the transition wall height, plus or minus the amount of deduct that you saw earlier in the parameters. And your trim length will also be adjusted based on the markers that we listed. Here's a question we'd like to know is, how many of you, when you have bump outs, would like to break the panel, have the panel continuous, or maybe both, liner panel and or insulation? So if any of you have an interest, here's our results. Looks like the majority will do both, and then break, and then don't break. Okay, so as we discussed, the liner panel is currently being broke at a bump out transition. When you're doing the data entry, you're only entering one liner for that wall. You do not need to enter the liner for the bump out and the liner for the wall. The BM is going to do that for you. It's going to break the liner panel internally in the BM input file, and it's going to break it into regions that work so that the BM can go ahead and detail the materials. So the Endwall drawing and the Sidewall drawing, we had to make some changes for framing and sheeting. Some of the common things you can think of is we had to draw the outline of the bump out, put some dimensions on there to indicate the extend, cross sections of the walls for bump out girts adjusted, eave strut moved outward, your Endwall rafter extended due to the bump out on a sidewall, stop your sheeting and show it for the bump out, and put the sheeting aligned with your wall sheeting scenarios on the drawings. So if we show a framing drawing, this is current output from MBS on a job. You'll see you have a separate view for the bump out, and you have one for your wall. We moved all the material for the bump out into its own view using the extension screens so that you have a more optimal use of space and clarity of what's going on. For the sheeting, you see a similar result. We've moved all the sheeting trim for the bump out region up into the bump out, and then just the wall sheeting and trims down in the wall region. Sidewall drawing, we're going to have a similar effect. You're going to see the framing. We're going to have two views. You're going to have your framing with top view and the bump out, and then the bottom of the wall for the framing just on the wall. And then sheeting, just like we saw with the Endwall drawing. Roof drawing, we have similar results that we had to make changes for. We have the bump out region to be drawn, dimensions. We had to extend the purlins out due to a bump out on the end walls, move the eave strut out if you had a bump out on the sidewalls, and extend the end wall rafter if your bump out was on the end wall, and then sheeting accommodations also because of the bump out. This is the framing view of a roof drawing where you can see the purlins have been extended out. So have the eave struts. And the sheeting view. Rigid frame drawing, we made the same outline accommodations. We have to draw the girts in that bump out region, dimensions, push the eave strut out, and then adjust the roof sheeting up top if you're using the sheeting view above the rigid frame drawing. Here's your rigid frame drawing. As you can see, right in this area here on the sidewall, we have the bump out where we have the outset girts, and then going down, we have the flush girts for the wall girts. Here's a sample rigid frame shop drawing. So as you can see, the girts for the wall, which are flush, we have the flush welded plates on the web. And for the bump out, we have the welded plates on the outside flange for those girts. And our eave strut is on the outside. When we introduced this, we had some previous questions, and if you weren't around to hear the responses or know those questions, questions were, girts on a bump out are designed as simple span only. Yes. At this time, we only have worked on the outset girts. We have not done anything for bypass for the bump out area. Another question was, is the bump out always sheeted? No. As you saw in the building entry, in the panel where you pick your panel type, you can actually select none. And you can do that for each bump out that you want to have no panel. Another question was, can there be openings in the bump out area? Yes, you may. As you saw, you can put walk doors, windows in the bump out region, and you can put openings below. The only thing we require is that you do not put openings that across or transition across that bump out transition point. So any jams going up must stop at a girt at or below that bump out height. And likewise for any jams above, they're not going to go any further down than the bump out girt at the bottom. Can the bump out be extended above the roof line? This is a bypass parapet, and no, at this time we are not doing that. It would require an extension beam there, and we're not supplying any beams at this moment. What happens with the insulation? It's the same thing as you saw with the liner. We break it into multiple regions. It will not span all the way up vertically. So with this, we'd like to throw another poll out. When you're doing these bump outs, what kind of scenarios do you run into? Do your bump outs run across all the walls? So there's a bump out on all 4 walls? Do you run into cases where it's on one wall only? Or do you run into multiple walls that require it? So the results were, most of the time, it's going to be multiple wall combinations. So that really concludes our bump out feature. If you have any questions that you haven't already typed, feel free to go ahead and chime in and get those to us. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next item. We're going to talk about supported canopies. So why would we do these? Well, as everybody knows, it's going to be faster than doing it in project, and it's going to be less building entry. So with a supported canopy, you're going to have a normal extension canopy or eave, and you're going to add a column out at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to revise the building input, and we've thought of 2 ways we could do it. It could be its own new tab, or it could be a sub-tab, and you're going to enter information such as what is the column type, what kind of splice you want. So if your column's all the way out at the end, do you want the column to be spliced underneath the rafter, or do you want it to be on the outside of the rafter? What is the offset? So if you need to push in the column maybe a foot, you'll have that kind of control. What is the elevation? So if you need the base of the column to go further down or up, you'll have that ability. And then you'll be able to give us some information regarding the floor so that we know if you're putting in a floor, if it's piers, what the elevation of it is, and parameters of the floor so that we know how to draw it around the columns on the anchor drawing. So at this time, we'd like to just kind of get a little feedback on this. When we do this new screen, we always kind of wonder how to do it. Would you like it to be a new screen of its own, or are you okay with us just adding a sub-tab to the current canopy and eave extension section? So your winner is, we're going to just add it to the canopy and eave extension. So with your current canopies and extensions is you have a fixed connection at the building line. So this is your diagram. But with putting a support column out at the end, we're going to have to change that. And we're going to have a pin connection support at each end of the beam. So this will be your new model. The comp design is going to have a transfer of snow drifts and sliding snow onto the below eave canopies. Loading combinations will include your basic loads of drift and slide. And there has been a new additional loads line that has been put in to the input for primary purpose of the drift and slide. It also allows for additional points and distributed loads for things such as collateral and support loads. So that is in the new and current CompDes input file. Based on the conditions of your supported canopy, you might fall under these 3 different scenarios, as you might have a partial length, full length, or it might terminate beyond. When it comes to the column out at the end, the rigid frame detailing and Endwall detailing are currently been revised and going through testing, where we have added cap connections. So for W and R types, you can use like the S2 connection, or the S3, or an S9. And we do allow for pipes and tubes as these column supports, and they will utilize the S3 connection. We also have the base plate, where with the W and R types, you can utilize the S2 or S3 connection. And then pipes and tubes we'll utilize the S3 type connection only. Panels and trim. We currently have no expectations for changes here. We are not doing any sheeting around the outside edge or perimeter of the canopy. This is just a column support under it. We're not coming down with a foot of panel and wrapping it around or anything like that at this time. Anchor drawing, we've had to make some changes. We draw the cross section of the column. We dimension it. We show the outline of the canopy region. And we consider column elevation if you've entered that and indicate that on your anchor drawings. And we have column reactions also. Here's an example of the current output on the anchor bolt drawing plan. That is out of MBS. Other than that thick line where I just kind of drew over the current concrete line of the canopy just to make it more obvious so you can see where we're talking. Framing. On the Endwall and Sidewall drawing, we show the support column member, draw the outline of a wall and support column at the end of it, and we dimension if the columns offset amount. So if we look at an Endwall Sidewall drawing output currently, this is what you see. So you'll see the canopy on the right side there with the column support out at the end. We have the mark of the column. We have the offset dimensions. And we have the heights. Here's the sheeting view. As we explained, we are not planning on any sheeting. So we just draw the outline extended out. Sidewall framing, similar aspect. We have the column at the end with its dimensions. The sheeting, just the outline of that canopy extended out there. Roof drawing. Some people show the mark of columns on the roof drawing, so we've made that revision to show the mark and the section of that column if it's on there. Here's a current roof drawing framing view. We are currently on our way to doing hips, yes. We are detailing these purlins trimmed back, as you see. We have the column supports out at the ends. Here's your roof sheeting. Yes, I know we need to work on the sheeting links. We will get those in there. But you have your sheeting for both your canopies coming out there. Rigid frame drawing. We draw the support column, offset in elevations. We will be showing it in the member table, along with the splice bolt information and any clear dimensions. This one we still have some work to do, but you can kind of see here where we have the canopy and we have a basic rectangle at least being started drawn right now. So we will refine that and get more information in there. We'll get the actual column shape and we'll get the dimensions, clear dimensions, and get it in the member table. Previously, when this was discussed as a discussion point, we had talked about questions which were, is the wall sheeting allowed? Nope. Not on this feature, we're not doing that. Can I use tubes for your support column? Yes, that is an option. Horizontal soffit. We don't have soffit purlins at this time, but flush purlins can be used, and that is an item we have as consideration that we would like to go forward with, is soffit purlins for horizontal soffit. And as some of you have already seen by the images, what about hips? It is a work in progress. We hope that sparked some good questions and interest. At this time, if you want to go ahead and chime in with some questions, I'm sure Dean would be happy to give you a response.
He's already been giving lots of responses.
Has he?
As you all probably see from the question posting list.
We will go ahead and look now at what is in progress. Well, as you have already saw, we've talked about some things, but here's a new one that you haven't seen yet, and we're not going to really go into it real deep, but just want to give you a heads up. We've revised the wall opening screen. It's going to be more of that record list-based input for the wall openings, which you're used to calling framed openings maybe. So you're going to see that coming down the pipe. We've been working on the comprehensive reports. This is a new one. You're going to be required to have Microsoft Word to utilize this feature. We're no longer using what we have had, and you're going to be able to import data into Microsoft Word, which is going to require you, as I stated, to have Word on your machine and not using it in the cloud. You need to have it on your machine because we utilize the API calls, which are only installed by having it on the machine. Here's an example where when you're looking in Job Manager and things, you see that isometric view where it's rendered. So this is a comprehensive report I ran where I pulled it in. So I could put that on my cover page if I like. I can create my own cover page however I would like it, as so could you. It will create you a contents or index based on the information that you import in here. It will import graphics such as your DXF, so you can pull in your design graphics as you like. It will pull in your design reports that are generated. And if you want, you can be specific enough just to pull in one section of a report. For example, in this one, I had it pull in the framing design, only the members subsection of the design summary of the rigid frame design. So you can limit it up and down as much as you want out of that file. If you like, you can have it import other Word or PDF or other type documents in there, or you could just put them in there and leave them in there as your template. So this is our new comprehensive reports that we're going to be wrapping up here probably in the next month or less and be pushing that out. It will replace the old. We are not going to maintain that one anymore. Just want to give everybody a heads up and kind of see what it can do. You can pull it into Word, and then some of those times when you feel like you want to modify the results, you can go ahead and modify them in Word and not have to worry about the old one, which you wouldn't be able to have that ability. Hips. Everybody's ready for hips, right? We're working on hips for the canopies. We have some framing concerns. We're looking at a hip beam possibly. If you're not going out too far, then you probably wouldn't need the hip beam. We're going to need to have clips. We're going to need some kind of way to connect the hip beam back towards the column area. So we're coming in with what we call a hip support beam, a little bit there, and we'll get into these a little closer detail. And we're going to have all the Purlin clips. So here's kind of a zoomed in image. We have the hip beam coming in here, and we're attaching it to a hip support beam going across the two extension beams. So we're looking at there could be two different connections that we might use here. One connection is the S2 where we use two loose clips. Another connection would be an S9 where we would use a welded plate to support beam to connect that hip beam. So at this time we'd like to kind of get some feedback from you as to what type of connection you're going to use or prefer. So we'll throw this poll out here and see what kind of responses we get. And it looks like S9 is the predominant one, S2 close, and there's some others. Those with other connections, we'd sure like to see what you have, so go ahead and forward them to us and we can take them into consideration if we're going to be able to work them in or not. Next, we're looking at the hip support beam and how it's going to connect to the extension beam. So one connection is we might be able to use a loose clip there to attach on each end. Maybe we can get a welded in plate on that hip support beam to bolt to that extension beam web. And the other option is maybe the S9 where we have the welded in plate on the extension beam web to bolt to the hip support beam. So as you guessed it, we're going to try and get a poll here and see what everybody thinks. Which ones would they use? Okay. Next, we're talking about the fun part. We're talking about purlins attaching to the hip beam. We have the case for bypass and we have flush. We'll see illustrations later, but for the bypass, we're talking maybe there's a single welded wing plate, or you could use the standard Purlin clip and bolt on there two loose wing clips. Maybe you use one loose wing clip bolted to your standard Purlin clip. And lastly, the one that everybody loves is a butterfly clip. For the flush case, maybe you're going to use a single wing clip bolted into the web, or you're going to use a welded wing plate. So we'll just take a look at those. So for case 1, the welded plates, weld 2 big plates up on top flange of that extension beam and bolt your Purlin straight to there. Maybe you want to use your standard Purlin clips and bolt 2 wing plates. Or instead of using 2 wing plates, maybe use 1 long wing clip there and bolt that with your Purlins. And lastly, the butterfly clip. And yes, as you guessed it, we're going to take another poll. I'm going to give you a chance to chime in on what you want to use for bypass Purlin connections. The butterfly clip is not done very often. There's probably a good reason for that, isn't there? Okay, and lastly, if you have flush Purlins, we're looking at a single loose plate or a welded plate. Go ahead and chime in. Let's see which one you would use. And the majority, not by long, but a bit, is to use the welded plate. Okay, we'll give you a couple minutes if you have any questions or comments you'd like to shoot real quick before we go into the next subject. One of the other things we're working on now is separate extension drawings. This would generate your fascia, canopy type views into a separate drawing than just attaching them into the current Endwall, Sidewall, and roof drawing. There would be one drawing per extension. You would have control over the content, so you could specify if you want one with framing only, sheeting only. Zone loads will go here, and also another one if you need the zone screw spacing. Those would go here also. So as you've kind of seen in the past, when you have extensions, you can get results like this. And because of canopies on the outside, your roof drawing gets a bit smaller and things get more congested. So it's not as obvious to read things and you have to do more cleanup. Another case here is you get some fascias, and due to the different views used there, everything starts getting smaller, tighter to read. Or you might have a canopy that runs over another canopy, so you get this overlappage. So it's not very obvious of what's going on where. So you got more cleanup. And then you get a sheeting view where just look like somebody stacked a bunch of sheets wherever they wanted. So with this feature, you would have your roof drawing. It would be all by itself. You wouldn't have those canopy views outside there taking up extra space, so you get more space back to your drawing for your roof. And you would have a separate extension drawing. And of course, since these are small canopies, they're going to be rather big, and you're going to have all this room. So that's what we're working on with extension drawings. Any feedback on that? Go ahead and chime in. We have created a forum. The point of this forum is for our users to be able to discuss things amongst one another. That doesn't necessarily need MBS involved. So you can share ideas, comments, questions. Maybe you're looking for a new piece of equipment and you want to have some questions answered by somebody else who's already using it before you make the purchase. These are things that you could do on there. You could collaborate. Maybe you have a design concern or requirement that you're wanting to figure out an approach that maybe you haven't thought of. The messages on this site are those of the authors only. This is our disclaimer. They are not by MBS. They are not our views. Any questions or concerns you have are your advice, and anybody that follows on such advice should be coming to you, as MBS is not aware of these. MBS staff does not regularly read these messages, so we will not support any comments or advice posted on here. However, we do have the ability to review and remove content or users who violate or put on inappropriate content. At this time, this is the forum site, which we're going to allow you to openly start. We have created categories for MBS enhancements, MBS software, mini software, shop equipment, and other. We created them in these type of categories. They may evolve differently down the road, but this was just our starting point. The purpose of our MBS announcements was to allow a person to get an alert when we post emails, because we post every email that is published at that date on there. So maybe you don't check the website, or excuse me, our FTP site, and you don't look at the spreadsheet often enough to know when something's pushed out. With this, you would get an email if you're watching that content, and you would know that something was pushed out or revised. So all you have to do is go to this here address, log in. First, you will need to create an account. So you click the little create an account label there. It will ask you to create your user ID, your associated email, give it a password you want to use, and yes, you need to validate you're a human being, agree to the rules and terms, and then upon approval, you will have access. So here you see the structure of this forum. You can see the layout that we have, the announcements, where we have enhancements released. So if you watch that, you can get an alert, heads up the day that we push those out, any enhancements that get revision notes, any news, such if we do more webinars, we can put those in the news content. You watch that, you can get a heads up there. Then we have the MBS software, design, detailing, building drawings, and shop drawing categories. And then we have the mini software with its design, detailing, and building drawing categories. Then we also create the shop equipment. So if you have any shop questions there, go ahead and start discussions on that. And then other for anything else that might not fit in a proper category. As we mentioned, the enhancement section, we put every PE in here for this year. And as soon as they come available, they'll go in here. So if you're watching this site, you will get an email alert. Just click that little icon there with that plus symbol to tell you want to get email alerts where new content is posted to there. And then you'll be up to date when the newest PEs are released. Doesn't mean you've got them implemented yet. It just means you know they're there. And for disclaimer, this is our terms and rules. You'll be welcomed with that message, but if you want to read it, there it is. So at this time, we'd like to know how many of you might use other forum sites. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. As many of you might see in this discussion, there's a spot with handouts. These are handouts on the connections for the HIPs. We put those together so you can download those if you like, review them, give us feedback on those. We put them there as a helping tool so you know what we're looking at.
Side note, a couple of you have checked the hand-raising box on the dashboard. If you want to post your question through the question dialog box, then we can type an answer and have that saved for everybody.
Okay, that pretty well concludes our content. We have a few minutes remaining if we would like to go through some questions and answers maybe.
I don't show an exact list, but we've probably gone through 2 or 3 dozen questions already that are posted. So you'll see feedback from those.
The projected canopies, there's a question on, is there a projected date? We're looking probably before the end of the year on this one. We've got a lot of the work done, so we feel really good on that one. Well, there's a question here. Will the presentation be available for download? Yes. Once we have these done, we will get them adjusted and posted up to our FTP site so that anybody at any time can download those and watch them.
We'll probably try and make a YouTube channel to add them to as well. Haven't quite got that far yet. Good, and you'll get a follow-up email after this closes, and then we obviously have the list of everybody that participated, and so we'll give you a direct heads up as to when things get posted. There won't be any questions there.
There's a question if we're going to add wall skirts on the canopy extension. It's something maybe we do down the line, but at this time, as we mentioned, it's only going to be the support column. There will not be any exterior skirt sheeting.
All right. We'll continue to monitor the questions for the next 5 minutes or so. This is the wrap on the presentation portion, so you can stay logged in and follow the questions, but we'll be posting those, so you'll have access to it later. But appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time today to sit through this. More coming tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Steve tomorrow on some design stuff, and Dan on Thursday with project aligned sidewalls and other aspects of new project functionality. So that's a wrap. Appreciate you joining us.